Welcome back to Upside Down Data. Let's talk about Internet Computer. So if you're not familiar, Internet Computer is a project that is quite ambitious. Really what they're trying to do is maximize the amount of compute that is possible in a decentralized context using blockchains as kind of the underlying technology. And really their end goal is to kind of replace the centralized infrastructure for the web and all the computing that happens there, really any kind of web-based application you can think of, and make it so that you could do it all in a decentralized way. Kind of end-to-end decentralization is what they talk about. Now, there's a lot of interesting things that they're doing as a part of this. They have all sorts of technologies that they're building with this. They have subnets to help with scaling. They have these canister smart contracts that can do some really interesting things beyond just what a normal smart contract is capable of. All of that is well beyond what I'm going to be talking about in this video, but you can go to their website to learn more about it. They have tons of information and documentation about the different ways that the network is set up and how it can achieve a lot of these different outcomes. But really, in the bull market, in some ways, the fundamentals, they only matter so much as they fit with narratives. That's kind of the unfortunate reality in some ways of a bull market. Narrative matters. Whether or not there's actually underlying fundamentals that are actually working or being adopted is kind of beside the point. So I'll let you decide on the fundamental values of Internet Computer and how well it's meeting those goals for yourself. It's not what I'm going to focus on here. I want to talk more about ICP, the token, and how it's holding up and where it might be going in the future. Because one of the things about the ICP token that has kind of acted against it really so far is its price history. If you just look at it, it was pretty much down only really until October of 2023. That was kind of the first time it was able to actually go in and start an uptrend, which is denoted as higher highs and higher lows. Before that, it was always lower highs and lower lows the whole way down. So it's a pretty bleak ride, especially for anyone who bought back over here. Now, one of the things that's interesting when you look at ICP is that if you denominate it in Bitcoin, the story is a little bit different. So the reason why people would want to denominate an asset in Bitcoin rather than the USD or the dollar is that a lot of times people care about relative performance. They care about, is this asset performing better or worse than Bitcoin, which acts oftentimes as the benchmark for the crypto space. Basically, if something's underperforming Bitcoin, why wouldn't you just buy Bitcoin? And if something's overperforming Bitcoin, then that suggests that it has additional value or additional reason to be in your portfolio beyond Bitcoin, which is often considered to be kind of that most safe, quote unquote, crypto asset. So obviously at the beginning for ICP, so this is basically the price of ICP divided by the price of Bitcoin. So basically as it goes down, that means ICP is losing value relative to Bitcoin. When it goes up, that means it's gaining value relative to Bitcoin. And of course, at the beginning, it was losing value to Bitcoin, but notably, it actually bottomed against Bitcoin all the way back in June of 22, then just largely went sideways relative to Bitcoin before then having this more recent rally. Whereas against the dollar, you actually had a lower low over here in September, October, relative to back over here in, actually all the way back here in June, certainly, and also back November, December. So that is something that's interesting to note. So kind of relative to crypto in general, or if you're using Bitcoin as more of a thing to kind of be that benchmark for crypto, it actually kind of just an accumulation zone against Bitcoin this whole time. And now it seems like it's broken out of that. If we just zoom in a little bit more, if there was kind of a resistance zone up here and support down here, we went ahead and actually broke above that on its Bitcoin valuation. And so that is a positive sign, it's a constructive sign, suggesting some relative outperformance. And that's not really surprising. ICP has been running pretty decently recently. From the lows, it's up currently 530%, up as high as about 646%. Quite nice, and that has been outperforming Bitcoin's returns over that time. Now, one thing that's going to be important to keep in mind with ICP when we think about, can it reclaim these higher levels and especially get to new all-time highs, really break back above some of these levels that it really slid down below, is the supply dynamics for ICP. This is something that's going to be important to watch. And one of the things that's unfortunate about ICP is that its supply dynamics are not the most constructive for its price. Namely, when it started, when we have, beginning price data here, I'm sorry for circulating supply data, at 124 million ICP that were in circulation, we had this massive amount of unlock that happened really through here, this massive unlock that happened, and we're now about 461 million. And the reason why this is important to keep an eye on is that just means that the dynamics of the market are now radically different than they were back here. We now have way more supply, almost 4 times as much supply on the market here than we did all the way back here. And price is determined by supply and demand. That is what determines price. So when you have massively more supply, you'll now need more demand to get back up to those same levels. So certainly that demand could come, but that's something I think is going to be important as context for what we're going to talk about next, is that we now are in a situation where to get to these prices again, you're going to need to have more demand to get back up to them. Something that's going to be important to keep an eye on. So that's one thing that's just context that's important to keep an eye on. But now I want to talk about some of our models and what they see for ICP going forward in this bull market. Because again, one of the benefits of a bull market is that in general, in a bull market, you expect prices to appreciate. So what I want to talk about next is what some of our models are seeing with ICP and what its upside potential really looks like. What is the longer term outlook? Those kind of things. So what I'm showing you here is our risk model, one of the versions of our risk model. This is the upside downside potential indicator. I'm showing you here the medium term UDPI. So this cares about moves that play out over weeks to months, so kind of intermediate, so not days to weeks and not multiple months, kind of in between those two time horizons. And so what we can see is this model does a great job of identifying these relatively low risks zones for ICP, and then also when it was getting kind of overextended with this run up. And we've now seen it start to bleed off quite a bit, cool off quite a bit, suggesting that there's now reasonable room to work with to the upside in that more medium-term outlook, but there's also reasonable room to work with to the downside. And so looking at this, we're kind of in that middle zone where if the broader market remains bullish or becomes more bullish, basically if this correction that we've seen in the broader crypto space were to end and we go on to the next leg up, I think playing with this upside potential here is very plausible. But if we don't see that, there is room for it to come back down. And so you might see it have to come back down into this kind of range that was in here, maybe even correct a little bit further before that next leg up. But we're not at this overheated zone. And so we're basically have much more room to work with to the upside if we want it now. The conditions are more favorable is another way of thinking about it now than they were back over here in January or December 2023, January of 24. So that's what I'm seeing there in kind of that more medium-term outlook. Have room to work with if broader market conditions allow, but it wouldn't have to. Now, one of the things that we can look at then to get a longer term outlook on ICP, so that's kind of talking about that medium term perspective, is our forecast model. So this is giving us a probability estimate. So basically, how likely is it in 6 months that the price of ICP will be higher than it is right now? And so you can read this as probabilities. So for example, 0.37 would be a 37% chance of upside in 6 months. And for example, 0.71 would be a 71% chance of upside in 6 months. And so you can see this model did a great job of identifying this bear market for ICP being really low, bearish outlook in that 6 month window. But then as we got into the bottom, shifting over to the bullish side. And then indeed, that has now played out. We now have prices moving up higher than they were 6 months ago, and we're continuing to have that pattern. And the good news for ICP is the forecast model remains bullish here. It now is estimating about an 85% chance that prices will be higher in 6 months than they are now, suggesting that this bullish outlook that we established back here is reasonable to maintain. And obviously that's not 100%, but it's a heck of a lot better than, for example, 5% like we were over here. So something I'm going to keep an eye on. If I saw a big reversal on the forecast model at some point in the not too distant future, that would be concerning, but so far, so good. And same thing with the UDPI. If we stay at lower levels or if we actually see risk cool off even more, that'll just be better and better signs for upside coming up. More and more favorable conditions for the next leg up. But if we see it move back up and risk get higher, that would again suggest that we might need more time to correct or cool off, just like we did back over here going into this period of consolidation. So ultimately then, obviously none of this is financial advice. You should make your own opinion about ICP. What I'm seeing is that really this was the kind of the tone that got set for ICP early, was just this very negative price action that set a lot of negative narratives about it. I do suspect that in a bull market, if ICP can continue to outperform, say, Bitcoin and continue moving up aggressively and put in really nice returns, some of those narratives will start to shift. People will start to take notice because that generally is what happens in crypto. Price will drive narratives, which then can drive price. It kind of becomes this feedback loop. If you have a lot of positive price action, that can lead people to form more positive narratives, which then lead to more positive price action. So it would not surprise me if that kind of dynamic could start playing a role for ICP, especially in a more bull market type scenario. But if that does happen, one of the important caveats or pieces of context to remember is that we have a lot more supply now than we did the first time around. So for ICP to reclaim some of these higher levels, it might just be a bit more difficult for it to do it the next time around. Not saying that's impossible, just might be a bit more difficult. But then when we're looking at our models and what they think, I think it's constructive. And it's not saying that a rally has to happen immediately or the next big leg up has to happen immediately, but certainly maintaining a bullish outlook remains reasonable. And that's not really surprising. As long as we're in a bull market in crypto, and the forecast model for ICP suggests we are, but then also models for other assets still suggest we are as well, this remains a reasonable outlook to have. But then if that changes, that's when I will get a lot more concerned. All right, if you like the content, remember to subscribe to the channel, give the video a like, and follow us over on X. A lot of updates for our models and more over there. And go to our website, PolarityDigital.io, to see live data from our models and more.